featuring Jean Gresh. We attempted to try to do this Facebook Live last Friday, but Facebook did not want to cooperate with us. And so the live unfortunately did not go. So I'm just gonna verify right now that we are actually live. I see that we're here. So as you guys tune in, please let us know that you are here and where you're tuning in from. So this is a brand new leadership series that I'm starting, and I'm super excited to be featuring Jean Gresh, who is a compounding pharmacist. He owns his own pharmacy called Pioneer Health Center in Vernon, Connecticut. And he is also a certified Institute for Functional Medicine practitioner. So welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah. So Jean and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and we've just had some incredible conversations about immune health, gut health, overall functional health in the body. So how all the different systems in the body are interrelated, and all the different, strategies that you can think of to help to optimize the body and get it back into balance. And so it's really interesting in the time that we're in right now, with the coronavirus pandemic, with everyone, being so top of mind with what can I do for my health? Like, what else can I do to be proactive, to protect myself? And so Jean, you and I were talking about this a week or two ago, and I was just so intrigued by some of these nutrients, these lesser known nutrients that you've been doing a lot of research on that can actually help to boost immune function, perhaps as much, if not more, than some of the other nutrients that we're seeing, people talk about and blogging about nowadays. So what I would love to do today is hear from you, some of this research that you're exploring in terms of these nutrients that you're learning about that can really help with the immune system and the overall viral load that people are afraid of right now.
Yeah, that's there is a lot. And a lot of information, and this particular virus is in the top of everybody's mind. But I will say that one of the things that I believe is that as a society, we're unprepared. And in many ways, but one of the biggest that I see is that our bodies are not prepared for this assault. And, we have a saying that it's not the bug that kills you, but it's our reaction to the bug. And that's true with this particular virus, is that mortality is related to a condition in the lungs of acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that is what basically results in death. And so when we look at our immune system and how we're functioning, and who is most at risk with this virus, we see that it's the elderly by far. And I'll show you some statistics on that. But also people who have comorbidities, people who are already inflamed, people who already have a lot of oxidative stress going on in their bodies, and their immune systems are already taxed. And so, one of the premises in functional medicine is to actually fortify the body, give it the nutrients and the things that it needs to be well, and remove some of the harmful things. Well, in this particular situation, I think today we can talk about what are some specific nutrients that we can use preventatively. And then we can maybe talk a little bit about what we would do to treat. But I think more in line with what I've been studying is that there isn't a disease or condition that I've studied that doesn't involve a nutritional component, not one. And sadly, in our conventional training, in my conventional training, I got very little to no education on nutrition. And then we also believe, because we live in a country that's very affluent, that we're getting enough nutrition in our food. And that is absolutely not true. I will go on record to say that we are affluently malnourished in this country.
I believe it.
Plenty of calories, but where are the nutrients? And so one of the nutrients, one of my favorites that I'm currently studying is vitamin A. And so not a lot of people are looking at vitamin A or talking about vitamin A, but vitamin A has a direct correlation to our immune response, and especially to what's known as secretory IgA. Secretory IgA is our immune globulin first responder that's produced in all of our mucous membranes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have adequate secretory IgA, your immune system tends to be more responsive and better to tolerate the insult. And so vitamin A specifically has a direct relation on the creation and distribution of secretory IgA in our mucous membranes. Again, it's our first responder. So if that is not up to par, we're going to be more prone for the virus to take hold and replicate faster.
Right, because it's like we lose that defense system.
Absolutely. And if we look at, there were studies done in marathoners. It's a known fact that marathoners, a certain percentage of them after they run a marathon are going to come down with some sort of a viral incident. And so they did a study, they measured secretory IgA before and after the race. And sure enough, those runners whose secretory IgA declined the most were the ones that were at most risk for developing the viral incident. So secretory IgA is a huge player, not only in our immune response, but it also, it's the immune globulin that tags our bacteria so that we know what's good bacteria and what's pathogenic bacteria and or other microbes. So we want a healthy secretory IgA. Now, vitamin A deficiency, I believe that it's an epidemic. It is, if we look historically at humans, we used to eat a lot of organ meats,
right?
Which was a very good source of vitamin A and vitamin D and other nutrients. Who among us are eating a lot of organ meats these days?
Not many.
No. And so we're taught that, well, that's all right because we can get vitamin A from carrots, from the carotenoids. And the carotenoids are in, even if you look at most of our vitamin supplementation, when they talk about vitamin A, they'll say vitamin A, a certain strength from beta carotene. Well, that assumes that beta carotene can get converted into real vitamin A. And that requires an enzyme known as beta carotene monooxygenase. It's abbreviated BCMO. So in my work in genetics, we can actually identify that gene. And it's been shown that about 45 to 50% of the population has SNPs in that particular enzyme, or the gene that controls that enzyme, that would make it inefficient for us to convert carotenoids to vitamin A. And so when we start measuring levels in our population, we're seeing low and low normal levels of vitamin A in consistently. So very similar to vitamin D. When we started measuring vitamin D, what did we discover? Almost everybody had low or low normal levels of vitamin D. Rarely did we see somebody have adequate. I say the same thing's going on with vitamin A. Now, it's interesting, I mentioned vitamin D and A, they work together in the body. And if we are deficient in either one, we're going to create problems. So when we talk about vitamin A supplementation, I always would recommend you also pay attention to your vitamin D. Now, if we look at what our ancestors also did, I think a teaspoon of cod liver oil a day. Well, what is cod liver oil? It's an organ from a fish that's high in vitamins A and D together. So vitamin A, there's research to show that it actually has a direct response in our immune system besides the secretory IgA. So it goes way beyond just secretory IgA, but I think that's one of the big caveats that if we are a society with low to low normal levels of secretory IgA, could we bolster it with higher vitamin A? And I believe the answer is yes.
And could secretory IgA be low in a lot of our population because vitamin A is low?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're kind of, when we go out in the rain and we say, oh, you're going to catch a cold, what's happening? It's not that, oh, we're going out and getting exposed to viruses. It's that our immune systems become compromised, just like the marathon runner. When we stress our body, it has an impact. And in some cases, over-exercising or, going out in the cold and getting wet and cold and having our body have to respond, it's going to lower your secretory IgA. We want, during this time of this virus, we want to have really robust secretory IgA and vitamin A.
Absolutely. And so is that to say that like a lot of vitamin A supplementation out there, like beta carotene and such, isn't as effective as supplementing with cod liver oil?
So the difference is beta carotene has to be converted to vitamin A. And we make the assumption that that happens. And I'm telling you that better than 50% of the population probably doesn't do it efficiently. So the only source of preformed vitamin A are from animal sources. So organ meats or fish liver or you name it. There is also synthetic ascorbyl palmitate, which is it's a synthesized version of preformed vitamin A. I, just based on all my years of work with nutrition, it's always better to get it from food than to try and get it in supplement form. But so if you can get a food-derived form of vitamin A, which would be from, say, fish liver oil, that might be the best source.
Because the body's most equipped to be able to convert that and understand how to leverage that nutrient.
I think so. I mean, it's part of our inherent food supply. And, quite honestly, I've learned, for example, synthetic vitamin E really isn't vitamin E. I haven't researched the synthetic vitamin A, but based on other things that I've read and learned, let's get it from the original source if at all possible, which is a food source.
Got it. And we have a comment coming in on Facebook from Bill. He's saying that vitamin D is water soluble, vitamin A accumulates and can be toxic if overdosed. What are your thoughts on that?
So vitamin D is also fat soluble. It's A, D, E, and K. And there is a concern that if you take large quantities of any of these nutrients over a long period of time, that you could build up toxic levels. I would be a lot less concerned about that based on what I've seen in the literature and studied myself. I believe we're all predisposed to lower levels. Pretty standard doses of 10,000 international units of vitamin A are pretty much deemed safe in our population. I will say the one contraindication for high dose vitamin A that we know for sure is pregnancy. So if you're pregnant or prone to or about to be pregnant, you wouldn't want to use high doses of vitamin A without working with a physician that can actually measure your levels. Because here's the thing, if you have low vitamin A and you can correct it to a normal physiological range during pregnancy, that to me would be more healthy than going into pregnancy being deficient in these nutrients. So yes, it is something that we want to be concerned about, but I would say your chances of being deficient are much higher than your chance of overdosing it based on these doses that we're talking about.
Yeah. And so what else are you seeing aside from vitamin A that's incredibly helpful for immune system and the virus?
So one of the things that I saw a study come out of China in which they actually looked at the microbiome of patients with the virus, and very fascinating. It was only a small number of patients, but in every case where the patient died, the bacteria that was identified in the GI tract was very, very dysbiotic, meaning much lower levels of your acidophilus and bifidobacteria and higher levels of pathogenic species. So what do we know in functional medicine about probiotics? They're necessary for us to be alive. They play a huge role in our immune system. And so being on a good potency probiotic, and what did I say about the secretory IgA? That when you have robust secretory IgA, it tags that bacteria to say, yeah, you're good, you can live here, versus tagging it to say, no, you're pathogenic, we need to fight you off. So good high potency probiotics may be something that I think all the patients I work with, we're really recommending, especially during this time.
Absolutely. And it's because
we don't see that much talk about that.
No, we don't. Yeah. And it's, you think about 70 to 80% of our immune system being in the gut. To have a healthy immune system, we actually have to have a healthy gut. So it all goes back to the gut.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that we are reading about, certainly vitamin C. Again, I think a consistent vitamin C intake. There are some studies that show vitamin C IV to be somewhat beneficial in treatment. But if we can make sure that our vitamin C, I mean, for years we've known that vitamin C is beneficial, especially with regards to an antioxidant and as a benefit with regards to viral infections.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of data on that. One of the other ones that is really, I think, important with regards to viruses is zinc. Zinc alone has a huge impact and actually works with vitamin A. They actually did a study that showed rodents deficient in both vitamin A and zinc had more depleted secretory IgA than either alone. So zinc actually plays a role. And, again, it's never just one thing, so we're talking about a whole host of nutrients. We could go on and say, we need to supply the body with adequate nutrition. And some of these nutrients are known to be deficient. Zinc deficiency is an epidemic. Magnesium deficiency, epidemic. So vitamins and minerals in general, we want to make sure that we're getting adequate nutrition. And goes back to our food. What kind of food are we eating?
Mm-hmm.
Are we still consuming the high sugars and the bad fats? Those are going to set us up for more risk.
Right. And yeah, so it sounds like there's an epidemic of overall deficiencies in the body, and that part of it's being driven by the lower quality of nutrients inside our food, but that it's also a part of what aren't you eating? And also, I'd assume the stress element that almost everybody is prone to these days.
Absolutely. So we need these nutrients more than ever.
Yeah.
And you mentioned stress, and we can't emphasize enough. There's numerous studies that show the benefits of meditation, and I can't imagine that could be any risks associated with meditation, but the benefits could be enormous. Praying, meditation, we're kind of sequestered, but figure out ways that we can actually lower our stress. That would be important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like now that people are spending more and more time at home, there's almost no excuse not to find some level of peace in your day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. I've been carving out 2 15-minute blocks in the morning and in the evening to find time to meditate or breathe or do yoga or something like that. And I know that it lowers my stress. And I mean, I'm sure you could speak into this, but it also is helpful for the gut.
Absolutely. It's amazing, when we start looking at what's going on in our society currently and how unprepared we are. In the practice of functional medicine, it's really a search of what's creating our inefficiencies that increase our risk. And the same things are now applying with regards to this viral infection. Another nutrient that I love and love to talk about is iodine. Mm-hmm. Iodine is probably one of the world's best antimicrobials, all microbes. As far as we know, there is no resistance that has been built up against iodine. And in fact, they're still using a form of synthetic iodine and povidone iodine pre-surgery because it's so effective at killing microbes. Now, I believe, again, we have an epidemic of iodine insufficiency. There's numerous papers that have come out to show that our iodine intake over the last few decades has dramatically dropped. And we think that we're going to get iodine, enough iodine from the little bit that's added to this toxic substance called salt. To me, that doesn't make any sense. So when we actually measure iodine levels in our patients, we're finding low and low normal across the board. And so iodine, in my hypothesis, if our bodies had sufficient levels of iodine, all of the tissues would have iodine in it. Iodine would help our immune system not have to work so hard. There's it's interesting. If we look at a disease like cystic fibrosis, cystic fibrosis is diagnosed when they do a sweat test and they identify saline or salt on in the sweat test. Well, it turns out that these patients don't have the ability, the pathways to take sodium and iodine. The sodium iodide symporter system isn't working effectively. So not only are they not getting sodium, but they're not getting iodine into their lungs. Mm-hmm. Now, again, iodine, great antimicrobial, cystic fibrosis, high risk of lung infections, high risk. And so, iodine is one of those things you have to be careful. You can't just go out and say, oh, I'm going to get a boatload of iodine, because, we don't want to initiate problems. But working with a practitioner who understands iodine, one of the problems with iodine is a halide, but we've been exposed to other halides, like, for example, bromides. Bromides ever present in our society now. We used to iodinate flour. We now brominate flour. And I don't know why that choice was made. My guess is probably a financial incentive. But we need iodine in our physiology, but there's no real known need for bromine. The other place we're getting bromine is our fire retardant chemicals, which are everywhere now. So we're under consuming iodine and overexposed to bromides. So what happens is, if you go and say, oh, I'm going to just bump my iodine up, I'm going to go out and take a good dose of iodine, chances are you might cause bromide to exit the cells and cause what's known as brominism. Now I see my screen has frozen.
Oh, I don't think on my end. It may just be on your end.
It's just my end. So sorry about that. I'm just looking at myself in a frozen, thinking.
We can see and hear you, so I think you're good.
So iodine could initiate what's known as a brominism situation, and excess bromine in the tissue causes all sorts of side effects. So you don't want to just go out and jump on iodine. You also don't, the thyroid. Iodine is absolutely necessary in the thyroid, and if you happen to be low on certain nutrients like selenium, you might be more prone to create a thyroid storm if you jumped on high doses of iodine. So it's important to do it intelligently and not just. But I think, over the long run, if more of us paid attention to iodine levels and we were able to get them, I would say, into a higher normal range, we'd be better off. And then you can also take iodine in very diluted amounts and gargle with it. That's another way that, gargling in general is very healthy. But if we can gargle with some antimicrobial like iodine or silver or zinc, just even hot water, on a routine basis, I saw reports that just even drinking hot beverages throughout the day might minimize that exposure for that virus, because the virus doesn't just go right into the lungs. It goes into the nasal and oral cavity and it binds to receptors, and then it works its way over days before it gets into the lungs. So while it's in the oral cavity or in the sinuses, it's an opportunity for us to have good hygiene and use some of these tools. A zinc lozenger. Just to benefit, our bodies and maybe lower that chance that virus will make it into the lungs.
So meaning that having the zinc actually dissolve and go down your throat is more helpful than ingesting like a capsule that would then get digested directly in the gut?
I would say yes. For this particular viral situation, the lozenge would be better, but having adequate zinc levels would be ideal.
Right. Yeah. And I think, something that you touched on earlier about, testing these levels to see what is actually like what you are actually deficient in before supplementing is wise. But, considering what is going on right now and like certain labs are closed and like, things like that are a little bit more difficult to acquire. Would you say that across the board, there are like safe levels to take some of these things regardless of if you're deficient?
Absolutely. the ideal way, as you said, if we were talking 6 months ago, I'd be saying, let's measure these levels and let's see what we need to supplement with in your particular body and your physiology. We could look at your genetics and see where your need would be higher. But right now, we don't have those tools available for the masses. And so there are safe levels that we can use for all of these nutrients that we've known for years. So to my way of thinking, it would be, the risk versus benefit would be in taking these nutrients in these physiological normal levels, would be probably a better benefit and with a very low risk.
That makes sense. Yeah, very cool. Cool. So we've talked about vitamin A, we touched on vitamin D and vitamin C. We've talked about zinc, talked about probiotics, talked about iodine. You had mentioned melatonin. Can you share more about that?
So, this is really kind of exciting for me. There was a paper that came out a couple of weeks ago in response to this particular virus. And in the paper, it really highlighted the fact that when we look at the population at most risk for this virus, it's those with a comorbid condition and the elderly. Mm-hmm. And so if you kind of look at what's going on in the elderly, especially, what happens where young people have better resistance, better resolve to handle this virus. And it turns out when we look at melatonin levels throughout our lifespan, they're highest in the young by far. I mean, I have a graph here that kind of looks at, I don't know if anyone can see this, but just shows by age the way melatonin levels go, that big red line. And by the time we're 60 or 70 years old, it's a mere fraction of what it was when we were a teenager or even 9. So this correlation goes on further to look at, again, when we look at the mortality rates, in the young, anywhere from 10 to 49 years old, the mortality rate is anywhere from 0.2 to 0.4% in this particular study. Mm-hmm. Once you hit 50, it jumps up to 1.3%. And you hit 60 to 69, 3.6%. 70, 79, you're now up to 8%. And almost 15% mortality rate in 80 years or older.
Wow.
So if we look at that in correlation to melatonin, well, that correlates pretty well. But the exciting news comes from when we go to the science and the literature. There were studies done in rodent models over the years that actually looked at melatonin's impact on what's known as the NLRP3 inflammasome, which is what incites that cytokine storm that people are dying from with this virus. So melatonin was used as a treatment in these rodents, and it actually stopped in its tracks that inflammasome-mediated cytokine storm. So what do we do? What do we do with that information? Physiological levels of melatonin. We can buy melatonin in 0.5 milligram all the way up to 3 milligrams. Would it be beneficial? I think, again, when we look at risk versus benefit, I think the benefit could be enormous, and I think the risk is very minimal. And again, if we had time, if we were talking 6 months ago, we might want to do studies on melatonin levels and just see where they're at. I can tell you that, again, I believe we're living in a society where melatonin deficiency is epidemic. Mm-hmm. And why do I say that? Because we now know in the scientific literature that some of the things that lower our production of melatonin are our exposure to light after the sun goes down. So all of the lights that we have been living with all these years since electricity was developed, and we haven't gone to bed at sundown, have lowered our ability to produce melatonin. Also, it's very interesting. If we look at seasonal changes in melatonin production, when it's summertime and we go outside and we get exposed to sunlight, that's when we produce more melatonin at night. It's also when our immune systems might be better. And maybe the seasonal variation in sickness, especially with viruses, might be related more to our own immune system and how strong it is based on the season versus how weak or strong the virus is. It might be a combination of both. But I'm telling my patients, we want your immune system as strong as it possibly can be. We want your hormone levels to be as robust. We know that hormone levels decline as we age, and I believe that they're declining at a more rapid rate based on our lifestyles.
Mm-hmm. So fascinating. Yeah. And so basically what you're saying is that, in times like, especially seasonal times like winter and stuff, when people aren't outside as much and they're not getting that natural sunlight and they're inside and staying up later and having all those exposures to artificial light, that it's actually suppressing our body's production of melatonin, and that's impacting the immune system.
Absolutely.
So fascinating.
I just ordered my own blue light blocking glasses because I'm not going to stop researching at night. So,
yeah,
if I can minimize, especially again, computer screens, TV screens, and then just plain old light bulbs are doing it. So anything that we can do to lower our exposure to that will improve our melatonin levels. And melatonin, we know it as it's involved in sleep. Well, sleep disturbances are one of the most common problems in society, especially among the elderly. So again, are there things that we can do right now to help bolster our ability to fight this infection? And I think melatonin could be one of those tools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. And then so when you talk about how, like, as you get older, you typically have less levels of melatonin, is it due to the compounding effect of having less real light exposure and having more artificial light exposure, or are there other age-related factors that contribute to that?
Well, there's a whole host of factors. I mean, melatonin's made in these pathways that are involved, serotonin and dopamine and all of our neurotransmitters. And in functional medicine, when we start looking at our society, we have tons of imbalances in our neurotransmitters. I mean, evidenced by the high rate of anxiety and depression that we see in our society. It's enormous. And, so inflammation is having a dramatic impact on those neural pathways, which is going to have also an impact on melatonin. So, it's never one thing, but if we can identify factors to resolve that, to lower inflammation, to improve our neurotransmitter pathways, we're gonna be healthier without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. So it's so fascinating, and why I love the work that you do and why I love the general field of functional medicine is that we can look at all these other factors and recognize that it's never just one thing. It's usually the compounding effect of multiple things, whether it's deficiencies or different types of stress in the body or the combo of all of those that is causing different areas of our body and our health to be compromised, which can make us more susceptible to getting things like the coronavirus.
Absolutely. One of the sad realizations I had about our scientific method is that we are so used to large randomized controlled placebo studies where we group everybody together and we look at one thing, one factor. And if it's never just one factor, how good are we going to be with that kind of science? No, we want to look at the uniqueness of the individual. And, personalized medicine, in my opinion, is the future. Being able to measure these things in individuals is to me, the gold standard. Having said that, with today's current pandemic, I believe that we can just assume that everybody out there has insufficiencies in many of these nutrients, just based on what we've studied in the past. And so, yes, fortifying our bodies, providing, the adequate nutrition, and also removing some of those toxins. We got to limit the amount of sugar we're exposed to. Sugar leads to inflammation in the body. And we are consuming more sugar than ever before in human history, and it's having an impact.
Yeah.
And we could have a whole day-long discussion just on that impact as it leads to inflammation. But I'm telling you, it does. And it's sad, but we really are lacking in nutrition in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow, so much great stuff. So we talked about vitamin A, zinc lozenges, vitamin C, the probiotics, iodine, melatonin, all these amazing nutrients that, some of them have made it to more mainstream media, or at least, other people in the holistic health space are talking about some of them, particularly zinc and vitamin C. But I think it's just so interesting to dive into the vitamin A, the melatonin, the iodine, the probiotics, that I'm just not seeing a lot of people talk about. And I think that's why I'm considering these some of these super nutrients that no one's talking about that people really need to be thinking about.
Yeah, vitamin A is amazing. I mean, if you really look at as a vitamin, like we started really paying attention to vitamin D. And what we have to be careful about, as I mentioned before, if we are supplementing with vitamin D and we have a low or low normal level of vitamin A, we could be creating more problems in our body. They work together. Vitamin A and vitamin D actually metabolize into hormone, like, in fact, they are hormone behaviors in the body and how they behave. And so they work at so many different levels. But if you really dove into the vitamin A and what it does for our body, it's not just about our eyes, although it does help with vision. But our immune response with almost every area of the body, when we start looking at vitamin A, it plays a role. And it works together with vitamin D in a synergistic fashion.
Right. Yeah. And so it's probably no surprise then that in cod liver oil we can get A and D.
Right?
Yeah.
Good source.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm just plugging my computer in here, losing battery. Cool. So any other research that you've been finding, or any other tips you want to leave people with in terms of, thinking about bolstering their overall immune system, anything else with regards to the virus?
Well, I mentioned gargling and drinking hot beverages. I mean, everyone's talking about washing your hands and social distancing. I personally believe that if we go out in public, we should wear a mask. The mask isn't going to protect you from getting the virus, but it could prevent the transmission of somebody who is infected. Right now, we don't know who's infected, who's not.
Right.
The testing is inadequate, and then you don't test until you get symptoms. Well, how many people are walking around asymptomatic that are infected?
Right.
So if everybody wore a mask, think about how that might minimize our exposure, along with the 6-foot distancing and all of that. So I personally believe that, and I've seen people are now making homemade masks, and anything that you can do. It may not be 100% effective, but let's just do everything we can to reduce just the ability to transmit that virus.
Right. Yeah, because the faster we can all comply and do our part, the faster that this will start to hopefully subside. Because I'm hearing a lot of people say that we haven't even hit peak yet, even though it feels like we have with all the measures that have been taken. But the numbers are saying that we haven't even hit that yet.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've been reading a lot about is that, young people just assume that they're going to be okay. But there are some young people that are dying from this virus.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the old, and it's not the unhealthy. And so we don't even know what the factors are that would cause death in what appears to be a healthy individual young, but it's happening. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just that we just don't know enough about this. And quite honestly, we don't have a lot of studies that looked at this specific virus with regards to, some of these antiviral strategies. One of the things that just popped into my mind is coconut oil. Coconut oil has antiviral capacity to it. So, using and consuming coconut oil could be a healthy dietary benefit to, again, any little bit that we can do. I know that when we travel, we take a little bit of coconut oil before we get on the plane, and we rub it on our nostrils. And because the passage of even the flu virus or cold germs when you're on an airplane, we know that that's an enclosed environment, but we can minimize our body's ability for the virus to get in and take hold if you have an antiviral substance right there. So those are just some simple, I was involved in a study in which we used coconut oil as our base ingredient, and we studied it in rodents. So we were trying to create a product that would be, if you remember the product Zicam or Flight
Mm-hmm.
Air Safe or whatever. But we were involved years ago, and we actually did a study, and it was shown in rodents to be very protective against the transmission of these viruses in the air. So, you know, we treated some rats with the product, which was a primary coconut oil based, and they had lower rates of transmission than the untreated rats. It was a fascinating study. So,
Mm.
you know, the little things that you can do.
Yeah, yeah, and those are all things that people have in their homes that can just be those easy remedies to help.
Yeah. Before you go out to the supermarket, again, um, it's really hand to face transmission because it's supposedly not in the air. But you know, even if you have coconut oil and you touch your nose, you know, it might be enough to help. We don't know.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, very easy enough to implement for sure.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. This is super, super helpful. I know that I've learned a lot just from speaking to you about this, and a lot of people too have been tuning in. So I think this has been a really helpful and much needed topic to speak about for sure. So before we wrap things up, is there anything else you wanted to share with people today?
Um, you know, I think one of the things I believe that's going to come out of this pandemic is we're going to have a lot more awareness um, of our healthcare system, of our bodies, of our, I would say, even our need to connect with fellow humans.
Mm,
And I really do believe that that there is a silver lining to this, and we will get through it. Um, and we're going to learn a lot, and we are learning a lot from it. But I do believe that um, that is my hope is that when we come out, that we're going to be more aware of these strategies, and you know, functional medicine might be looked at as a way that we can actually bolster our immune systems before something like this happens.
yeah.
You know, that's what we do. So
Absolutely. I think it's a really pivotal time in history. And I think what you said is so spot on. Like it's just, there's a whole new level of awareness that people are gaining about their health, the immune system, and that we aren't necessarily as strong as we think we are in terms of, you know, our health and how it protects us if we're not doing the right thing. So I think it's going to enable people to be even more proactive about their health, and by doing things like this, not just now in times of like dire need, but like on a day-to-day basis where, you know, you can be the most proactive. And I know that that's the whole premise of, you know, functional and holistic medicine is how can you be proactive every day by doing the right things for your body so that you aren't sidelined by an infection or disease later on in life.
absolutely. You know, I was just at a meeting this week with a group of practitioners, and we were commenting on how resilient our bodies are with, because everything we're studying is we're inundated our bodies with toxins everywhere. I mean, it's just amazing in our world, whether it's EMFs, light frequency, herbicides, pesticides, new to nature chemicals. We are inundating our bodies with so many of these toxins, and yet we're still performing at still pretty high levels. Yes, our
Mm-hmm.
sickness rates are going up, our cancer rates are going up, but we're still, you know, by and large, performing pretty well. So if we have the opportunity to identify and change those things, you know, I think the sky's the limit with regards to human health and longevity.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And that's why, you know, I love working with people like you because it's about activating this level of information that people need to know. And that now is the time where practitioners like you are stepping in and helping to lead the education and awareness around health and wellness, because our conventional medical model cannot, you know, help people right now. It's in emergency mode. It's helping people with this virus. And you know, with more people now aware of their health and wanting to take charge of things, we need people like you and health coaches now more than ever. And, you know, I know that I speak to all of my health coaches that are clients of mine about, now is the time to lead and to really step up and help the world in this time of need. So I'm so grateful that you were willing to hop on here and spread this knowledge. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my passion to share what I've learned. So
Yeah, absolutely. So if people want to follow up with you, whether to check more about Pioneer Health or to get in touch with you or apply to work with you, how can they find you online?
So we have a website at pioneerhealthcenter.com. And our compounding pharmacy and office is located in Vernon, Connecticut. And again, it's under either Pioneer Health Compounding Pharmacy or Pioneer Health Center.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Perfect.
and our phone number is 860-979-0089. If there's things that we can help with, I got into pharmacy because I really wanted to help people be healthy. And through functional medicine and compounding, customized, personalized medicine, we're having a better impact than I ever saw in my conventional practice. So, if anybody wants to reach out and learn more, or, give us a call or check out on us.
Awesome. And then you're also accepting applications for people to work with you in the functional medicine arm of your business as well on the website.
Really focusing on what I believe is going to change the landscape tremendously, and that's genetics.
Mm-hmm.
We can now map our individual genome, and we have software that allows us to interpret it, and we're finding amazing information. And it's our genetics don't change, but what we can do is we can identify which environment we are most likely to thrive in and which environment that we want to avoid. And by environment, I'm talking about nutrients, food, you name it. There's so much, with the Human Genome Project, we put to rest the question, are we genetically destined for disease? And the big answer was no, we're not. The biggest factor that relegates whether a gene expresses or not is the environment in which it's exposed. Mm-hmm. And so the whole field of epigenetics and nutrigenomics is especially with functional medicine, is allowing us to look at the uniqueness of the individual and really customize therapies. So that's where I'm focused.
I love that. So needed. And then when we understand how we can actually influence our genes and via the environment around us and bring our genes back into a happier place where they can function normally, think about like what that could do for the longevity of your health and your life and how you feel. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing. All right, Gene. Well, thank you so much. So again, anyone who wants to get in touch with Gene or learn more about his business, pioneerhealthcenter.com. He is also tagged in this post if you want to get in touch with him directly that way as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have any follow-up questions, especially if you're watching the replay, please post those in the comments and we'll be on the lookout for those and can answer your questions. So thank you everyone for coming on, and see you soon for our next Health and Wellness Leadership Series.
Thanks.